Thank you. Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the Foreign Policy Research Institute's 16th Annual Benjamin Franklin Awards celebration. I'm really excited for us to be back together for a live annual FPRI event. And what a venue. Have you looked around this place? It's amazing. Anyway, a special thank you for the venue to Comcast NBC Universal for providing FPRI with such a spectacular event space and countless hours of pre-event and event planning to make this possible. I also thought it would be ideal to start with a bit of humor. Isn't that what you do at these things? So a Russian and a Ukrainian walk into a bar. No, stick with me. The Russian says to the, it really doesn't work. As much as I'd like to share some humor, the truth is what we do at FPRI is serious and it's really important. And thank you for your interest and your support of our work. But tonight, it's a celebration of an aspect of international relations that receives little attention, yet plays a vital role in American foreign policy. And that's cultural diplomacy and good Americans doing good work abroad. But we'll talk more about that later. I'm so proud to be a part of FPRI and to lead FPRI. In our heightened partisan world, FPRI, I believe, is more important than ever. Our stellar staff of experts and over 100 scholars educate policymakers, policy influencers, the public, and the next generation of international affairs professionals on the most pressing foreign policy challenges facing the United States today. FPRI was founded in 1955 by Ambassador Robert Strauss-Hupé on the premise that a nation must think before it acts. As we're fond of saying around here, that was good advice then, and it remains good advice today. Ambassador Strauss-Hupé, one of the most influential geopolitical strategists and thinkers of the 20th century, was a University of Pennsylvania professor who went on to be a long-serving U.S. ambassador to Turkey, NATO, Sri Lanka, Belgium, and Sweden. Of note, he was appointed by both Republican and Democrat presidents in the true spirit of nonpartisanship that still characterizes FPRI today. We continue our work in this spirit of Robert Strauss-Hupé. Our nonpartisan, evidence-driven analysis is accessible through our reports and publications, through the briefings and analysis for U.S. government agencies and Capitol Hill staff, through public events, and through our educational experiences for both students and students at heart. Since we last came together for this annual event in the fall of 2019, our audiences, in fact, have expanded exponentially and geographically. Just this year, there have been over 2.5 million views of our fact-based analysis from people who live on every continent in the world. As a 501c3 nonprofit, achieving our important mission is made possible through charitable contributions. FPRI's work would not be possible without the generosity of our members, partners, and board members. Thank all of you for your support and advice, and a special thank you to the members of our Board of Trustees for all they do to help and support FPRI. And also, a special thank you to tonight's corporate sponsors, Glenmead Trust, BNY Mellon, and Comcast NBC Universal for your support this evening. I would also like to take this moment to acknowledge the FPRI trustees and friends whom we have recently lost, including the following trustees: Samuel Savitz, Jerry Rubenstein, Michael Novakovic, Lionel Savadov, Robert Fox, and Alan Reed. And the 2018 recipient of the Benjamin Franklin Award and former Secretary of Defense, Ashton Carter. It's now my great honor to introduce the chairman of FPRI's Board of Trustees, Robert Friedman.
Thank you, Raleigh, and welcome everybody. Everyone knows that America and its allies face serious national security and foreign policy challenges today. It is sad to say, but the inability of nations to live in peace with each other has been and continues to be quite discouraging. This year has been particularly depressing with the return of barbarism in the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Less well reported and much more optimistic is the soft power of American cultural organizations showcasing our values and ideals across the world, and of Americans doing humanitarian work abroad. It all started a century ago when, in the last year of the First World War, millions of civilians in Belgium and Northwest France faced starvation. That's actually incredible. This was the most civilized area of the world, and people by the millions were going to starve to death. One wealthy American, largely using his own money, organized a gigantic relief effort, delivering food to famine-stricken Europe. He became known as the Great Humanitarian. 10 years later, he was elected President of the United States. You might be surprised to learn his name was Herbert Hoover. 25 years later, two Americans founded CARE, C-A-R-E, to provide food and relief to Europe after the devastation of the Second World War. Today, there are a huge number of private American organizations trying to make people's lives better all over the world. Some send livestock to poor farmers. Some provide medical training and medical services to those in need. Some provide education to global learners. The particular American we honor today, Robert Gersony, interviewed refugees to learn what was really happening in dangerous, ungoverned places from which they had fled. His findings, nobody else knew what he knew, enabled our State Department to do a better job in supporting the good actors and challenging the bad actors. Robert D. Kaplan wrote an entire book about Gersony. It is a wonderful, uplifting story. We will give a copy of this book to each of you as you leave at the end of tonight's program. Kaplan holds FPRI's Robert Strauss Hupé Chair in Geopolitics. He's the author of 21 path-breaking books on foreign affairs and one of the most thoughtful writers on the subject. Later in the evening, he will interview Gersony and give him our award. As FPRI's chairman, I give special thanks to the entire FPRI staff who have performed above and beyond the call of duty in getting us through the pandemic years while we adopted new technology, enabling us to reach more people than ever before. I'd like those in our staff who are here now to stand for a round of applause. We will now share with you a brief video which shines a light on FPRI's work.
nation must think before it acts. These words have guided the Foreign Policy Research Institute since its founding in 1955. FPRI provides trustworthy, evidence-driven information to U.S. policymakers and the American people so that they can evaluate the challenges and opportunities before our nation and craft the most effective foreign policy possible. FPRI's work spans the globe, with programs covering issues in Eurasia, Africa, the Middle East, Asia, and America in the West. FPRI briefs U.S. policymakers to ensure our leaders hear perspectives from outside the D.C. Beltway. FPRI experts facilitate dialogue between U.S. officials and our allies so that we can better align our efforts and overcome international challenges together. FPRI's educational content for the public cuts through misinformation, informs people about the foreign policy issues relevant to their lives, and provides opportunities to directly interact with leading experts. FPRI shares its insights through a diverse range of formats to ensure maximum accessibility, including online and in-person events, briefings, podcasts, reports, issue briefs, and FPRI's flagship journal, Orbis. FPRI's learning opportunities for students and young professionals inspire and prepare the next generation of foreign policy leaders. A nation must think before it acts, and FPRI provides our nation with the tools to do so.
Thank you, Bob, for your remarks and for your stalwart leadership. FPRI would certainly not be where we are today without you. That video really captures the essence of FPRI, I think. And I also need to note that our publication, Orbis, is celebrating its 65th year of publication this year. And I'd like to say a special thank you to all of our editors of Orbis, past and present, including Walter McDougall, who was in the audience today. They have made Orbis a must-read journal of foreign affairs commentary. Our theme tonight, Good Americans Abroad, allows us to do more than just highlight some of the great work being done today, but also how the efforts of Americans abroad can positively affect the communities where they work. And now, to share his experiences working abroad, Ambassador Charles A. Ray, who is the chair of FPRI's Africa program and also a member of our Board of Trustees, will say a few words. Ambassador Ray spent over 3 decades in American Foreign Service, serving as the U.S. Ambassador to Zimbabwe and the Kingdom of Cambodia. Go to the video.
Few Americans have an accurate picture of what American diplomats do abroad other than attend fancy receptions and hobnob with government officials. Fewer still know what private American citizens do when they travel or live abroad to advance our country's national interests, to improve our international image, and to help improve the lives of the people in the countries they visit. During a 30-year diplomatic career, I served in 6 countries and visited in an official or personal capacity dozens of others on every continent except Antarctica. During those 3 decades, I've witnessed firsthand the unsung achievements of Americans who represent the better angels of our culture. Private citizens and private commercial interests serve not only our policy goals, but help local people in ways that the government never can.
That's a perfect introduction to help us understand the important work that the organizations do that we're going to highlight tonight. Each of them has a profound impact, sharing American values and culture in the communities they serve. Our first partner this evening is the Vietnam Education Fund, which is doing just that, working to nourish and educate the next generation of global citizens. Here's how they do it.
Scholarship program and the Milk program. The scholarships provide financial assistance to students at all educational levels. One particular area of focus for VEF is education in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, the STEM fields. However, we also support students who major in other fields that will benefit the local communities.
We have given over 200 scholarships, roughly $80,000, to students in 30 schools in the 4 major cities and towns in Vietnam. Many children in Vietnam suffer from malnutrition, which in turn hinders their education.
VEF has donated over 20,000 cartons of milk since we started the milk program.
At VEF, we want to inspire people to contribute to and participate in its mission to help these beautiful young people achieve a much better future.
Very impressive. And you can learn more about the Vietnam Education Fund and each of our partners by visiting their websites, which can be found on the FPRI website. To tell you more about our education program and our internship programs, it is my pleasure to introduce Tara Spencer, who is our Membership and Administration Manager and Director of our internship program.
Thank you, Raleigh. Education is central to our mission, and I'd like to take this moment to thank our supporters for providing funding to advance this aspect of our mission. Our robust internship experiences, high school programs, and lifelong learning series educate the public about how national security issues and foreign policy impacts their lives. We have over 700 students competing for an internship each year to work alongside an FPRI scholar, providing research and analysis, writing support, and publishing their own analysis. Many of our interns and research assistants have gone on to remarkable careers, including former Secretary of the Navy, John Lehman, who is a member of our Board of Advisors. For our high school students, we have civic literacy and historical simulations. All of this is to encourage them to pursue careers in international affairs and public service. In the video we're about to show, you'll also learn about our newly launched certificate seminar program for Ukrainian and advanced degree students. This program has connected FPRI staff and scholars with these students whose education has become perilous because of the war. Each week, lectures feature FPRI Senior Fellow Dan Whitman and one guest lecturer, including notables such as former Secretary of Defense Robert Gates. We at FPRI feel gratified that we could respond so quickly and commit ourselves to these Ukrainian students.
FPRI for years has had a very robust internship program, and it's an opportunity for the next generation to learn about careers in international affairs and public service. We also have lifelong learning programs for students and students at heart. I believe our nation depends on attracting the best and the brightest of the next generation into this field and into public service. Our nation depends on it.
We are a nonpartisan think tank that deals with foreign policy and international affairs. And so the purpose of this conversation is to advance our education agenda. We have a particular way of looking at the world at FPRI that we like to talk about and to share. And that's why I'm delighted to have you all here today.
Hello. My name is Hannah Basis, and I'm a sophomore at the University of Pennsylvania studying political science and Mandarin. I've had the great fortune to work with FPRI over this past year on various projects with President Flynn, as well as in FPRI's Africa and Asia programs. What I appreciate most about FPRI is the accessibility to staff and scholars.
Hello everyone, I'm Salome Pachkoria and I have been interning at FPRI since January 2021. The first time I heard about FPRI, it was when I was looking for the different think tanks in the US that focused on the Eurasian affairs, and FPRI seemed to be one of the most prominent ones. So I decided to apply and I got in. In January, for the first couple of months, I was helping different Eurasian scholars in the Russian language research, which was really interesting.
At FPRI, I worked at a variety of tasks, including proofreading of manuscripts, helping to manage the subscription list of Orbis, serving as a research assistant, being a jack of all trades. The work was varied and fun. That summer, too, I met Alan Luxembourg, who also had just graduated from college. He was my immediate supervisor, and I have never had a better boss. He and I were both keen students of history and sought to apply what we learned from looking at the past to gain insight into our own troubled times. We have been lifelong friends ever since, and I am grateful to that friendship that I have with Alan.
In the time span that I was able to shadow the work of, in the daily operations of a think tank in Philadelphia, I was able to develop my interest further and I think better identify what I wanted to do with myself as a scholar. So far, after having been associated with FPRI as an intern, I have been able to really make the most of all of the fruits that the organization has to offer.
In the early 1970s, 1971, 72, I was a graduate student at the University of Pennsylvania, and I was fortunate to have an internship at FPRI. And in those days, I worked on the issues of the moment, communism in Eastern Europe, the NATO alliance, and so forth. And I had the opportunity to work with some legendary FPRI figures, such as Harvey Sickerman, the president of the institution, Bill Kintner, and one of my teachers at Penn, Bob Pfaltzgraf. So I look back on this as an extremely important moment in my young life, my developmental life, I would say, that helped me prepare for a time in both the academic world and public service, and exposed me to some of the great figures of the day and the work they were doing. So for all of those reasons, I'm forever grateful to the Foreign Policy Research Institute, and I wish you all the best in the future.
FPRI expanded its educational program to Ukraine this year in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
I would like to start by thanking you and everyone from the Foreign Policy Research Institute, from the Institute for European, Russian, and Eurasian Studies, National Law University, of course, and to, of course, the retired U.S. Foreign Service officer, Jack Zatluchik, who's with us, for putting together this excellent course for a very diverse and great group of people that we see on the screen today. So it's very important for us, while we fight, to continue to learn, to continue to plow, to continue to raise children, to continue to grow food, because this is who we are as Ukrainians.
Thank you, and thank you, Tara, for that presentation. Colleges and universities have had foreign exchange programs for years, enriching the lives of their students. The students at Dickinson College also leave a lasting impression on the communities where they study. The video we're about to show about Marcus, a Dickinson student, demonstrates this remarkable impact better than I can. Let's watch.
Once a week on Tuesdays, I make the walk up to this neighborhood and Isha and I hang out. I'm really just there for him as a native English speaker, and we kind of come out here and play sports with his friends, either football, basketball, or soccer.
Hey, Sean, what's up, buddy?
His parents just want him to get better at English, talk to him about, what's going on in school. There you go. Anything to help him hear more English and get used to pronunciation.
No, you the whistle.
The ref, all right, fair.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Prego. Come out here and play in the streets, it reminds me of growing up and hanging out with my friends. Oh, bene, molto bene.
It's amazing.
Our next partner we will feature this evening is the Viscardi Center. Through Henry Viscardi Achievement Award, the Viscardi Center puts a spotlight on disability advocates around the world, enabling these advocates to better serve their communities. Let's take a look.
First established in 2013, The Henry Viscardi Achievement Awards honor the legacy and vision of the Viscardi Center's founder, Dr. Henry Viscardi Jr., who wore prosthetic legs. He was one of the world's leading advocates for people with disabilities and served as a disability advisor to 8 U.S. presidents. These international awards recognize exemplary leaders in the disability community who have had a profound impact on shaping attitudes and policy and improving the quality of life of people with disabilities. The Viscardi Awards have been bestowed upon 80 recipients from over 20 countries. We are astounded by their international growth, as seen through the number of highly qualified nominees each year and the new countries that submit nominations. It is a testament to the visibility and far-reaching impact of leadership within the disability community.
FPRI also collaborates with think tanks abroad, providing opportunities to scholars around the world to learn and grow as experts in international affairs. One of the reasons FPRI analysis is sought by U.S. policymakers is that we're outside of the Washington, D.C. Beltway bubble. Our partnerships with allied countries' think tanks is yet another way FPRI tests its assumptions and produces objective research. Here is Linus Kojala with the Eastern European Studies Center in Lithuania. This is one of the many international partnerships that FPRI has.
We were able to organize a lot of discussions together on things related to the development of Central and Eastern Europe, as well as to the Baltic Sea, on 3 Seas initiative, on events in Belarus, on Russia's aggression, on obviously the rising power of China, and other topics. We were also able to publish at least a couple of policy papers related to issues of importance for the Baltic states, for instance, on how to maintain the interest of the US in the Baltic state region, how to address new challenges, how to seek new ways of cooperation at the time when global shifts are emerging in front of our eyes, and there is obviously a need for democratic countries to engage in a much closer and a much more effective dialogue than ever before. So I think this is the best way of maintaining the transatlantic link between think tank communities, between experts, because exchanging thoughts and opinions, discussing issues of relevance for both sides, and seeking new ways of cooperation, I think, is the best path in providing also advice and solutions for our decision makers.
Our next partner, Bluemont, captures the theme of good Americans abroad through their work in international development with communities in need all over the world. FPRI held a virtual event last year, one of 85 events seen by thousands of people, where we had the opportunity to talk to Bluemont about their work in Afghanistan and around the world. Tonight, I'm very excited to highlight some of their work for you. Let's take a look.
At Bluemont, we are working toward a world where a community's future is not determined by its circumstances, but by the aspirations of its people. We partner with U.S. agencies and other international governments and institutions invested in helping to rebuild, restore, and revitalize communities. We help empower people to take on the challenges that have held them back. With U.S. government support, our teams are helping families recover from trauma and displacement in Colombia. That's just one of the many things we do. We also help rebuild communities after conflict in Syria and provide girls in Pakistan the opportunity to go to school. In Afghanistan, we are helping to deliver life-saving and life-sustaining humanitarian support to people in need. U.S. international development programs are an investment in a stronger, more stable global future. A future where girls can go to school, businesses have electricity to power growth, and communities have a solid foundation to build on. This is the future we want to see, and with our partners, we're committed to doing the work to create a positive difference in the world.
I would now like to introduce you to our new Director of Research, Jim Ryan, to talk a bit about how our next partner, the newly merged Citizen Diplomacy International and the World Affairs Council of Philadelphia, engage in critical cultural diplomacy work.
Thank you, Raleigh. As we continue to look at the good work these organizations can do for both communities they serve and the American community, we would like to turn to the Citizen Diplomacy International, which recently merged with the World Affairs Council of Philadelphia. Through people-to-people diplomacy and exchange of ideas, the Council advances Philadelphians' understanding of the world by creating the next generation of global citizens and furthering Philadelphia's position as an international hub. This evening, we are taking a look at how the Council is able to achieve this goal by providing students, who are the region's next leaders, with educational experiences that will enrich their understanding of international affairs.
The World Affairs Council of Philadelphia and Citizen Diplomacy International are merging. Together, we connect Philadelphia to the world and are stronger. One of the things we are most proud of is providing access to world affairs education to over 3,000 local middle and high school students annually. Our newest education program is the Citizen Diplomat Academy. This unique virtual high school exchange program engages local and international youth on two different topics: social innovation and STEM entrepreneurship. Throughout the program, students develop themselves as citizen diplomats while applying the core skills of diplomacy and cross-cultural dialogue to learn with peers in other countries across the world. We invite expert speakers to discuss the major issues facing the young people today on science, technology, engineering, math, and social entrepreneurship. The young citizen diplomat participants utilize the technology of today to become the leaders of tomorrow.
Not only does it have the STEM field, but it was also global. So it was like also learning about other people's ideas based on where they came from and like exchanging those ideas.
We are now in for a special treat this evening. Thanks to Christine Cox at Ballet X, we have a beautiful performance choreographed by internationally renowned choreographer Amy Hall Gardner and inspired by Mural Arts Philadelphia. This performance highlights the unique power of the arts to bring together communities across the globe and to inspire cultural dialogue. That performance was spectacular. The arts provide an international language that connects us all. This is also true of other areas, including the science, the humanities, and medicine. Let's now turn to Philadelphia's Jefferson University to highlight the international impact of Jefferson Global. We'll be hearing from some of the Jefferson Global participants.
Curiosity drives us to create and innovate. Collaboration calls to the brightest minds from around the globe. And a sense of responsibility calls us to change the world. Jefferson's bold university plan and global strategy are focused on preparing students for the future of work and on collaborative research and discovery in strategic areas of the world.
Our final partner featured tonight is Eisenhower Fellowships. Eisenhower Fellowships are granted to diverse, dynamic leaders to enhance collaboration across borders and drive positive impact in the world. In the video we're about to see, we will hear from individual Eisenhower Fellows who were involved in the fight against COVID.
Instead of our original 2-year plan to launch telemedicine, we trained 5,000 clinicians in 4 weeks. In 2019, pre-COVID, we performed 7,000 video visits. Post-COVID in 2020, we performed 1.1 million.
In Rwanda, we provide medical consultations over the mobile phone. We entered into a partnership with the government of Rwanda to take care of people who are asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic and do have COVID, so that they don't need to go and clog the healthcare system.
We have about now 13 hospitals across Pakistan. We have public health and primary health programs in 51 districts of Pakistan. We have 4 renal blood centers. We have 4 physical rehabilitation centers.
It sort of made my fellowship, project almost seem prophetic, because suddenly people started coming back to me and saying, well, that critical care unit that you were talking about, how can we do it?
The fellowship program has had one of the biggest impacts on my life. I think without the fellowship, I would have never been open to what I'm doing today.
A special thanks to all of our partners this evening. They truly exemplify good Americans abroad. As many of you know, FPRI's annual Benjamin Franklin Award for Public Service is a great tradition. We were unable to hold this ceremony for the past 2 years, and tonight we're restarting this FPRI tradition of giving the Benjamin Franklin Award for Public Service to an American whose service as a statesman, sage, or soldier best exemplifies the ideals of Benjamin Franklin and the United States. This year's award recipient is Robert Gersony, whose years of service for the United States Agency for International Development exemplify the ideals of the Benjamin Franklin Award for Public Service. To give us some background on the good works of Bob Gersony, here is Robert D. Kaplan, FPRI's Robert Strauss Houpé Chair in Geopolitics and author of The Good American, The Epic Life of Bob Gersony, the United States government's greatest humanitarian.
Thank you all, and good evening. This is the greatest person you've never heard of. And that's the whole point of it. It was too good a story for me to refuse to do. Imagine you have someone who is a high school dropout with a mild learning disability, who was from a family of Jewish Holocaust survivors in Manhattan, who dropped out of high school, went to Vietnam as a soldier, earned a Bronze Star for service, and afterwards came to the attention of the U.S. Agency for International Development. And that began a story of 45 years of living in the developing world out of a sleeping bag, going from one Cold War crisis in what was then called the Third World to another. You know, the Cold War began in Europe and it ended in Europe. But in between, all the wars and humanitarian tragedies that were offshoots of the Cold War occurred in the developing world. And Bob Gersony was there for almost all of them. You know, right now, we remember Rwanda, we remember Bosnia. We've kind of forgotten Mozambique in the 1980s, which on a scale of magnitude was much greater than Bosnia and other catastrophes. Bob Gersony went to Mozambique. He spent several months interviewing about 400 displaced persons and refugees, all in isolation, all for 3-hour interviews, and came to the conclusion that the Renamo guerrillas, who the United States government under President Reagan were on the verge of supporting in the Mozambican Civil War, were just a bunch of murderers and killers. And Gersony single-handedly convinced Secretary of State Schultz and President Reagan not to arm them. And long story short, that led to the end of the Mozambique Civil War and saved probably upwards of 1 million lives. And that was just one of 54 assignments in the developing world where Gersony did one of two things. He either stopped wars, stopped conflicts, or brought to light previously unknown instances of genocide, whether it was in Chad, whether it was in Somalia, et cetera, et cetera. And he didn't just work in Africa, he worked in South America, on the South and North Korean border, in Southeast Asia, all over the world. He was sort of a character out of a Saul Bellow novel, a deep interiority, psychologically complex, but operating in a Joseph Conrad setting. And you know, he put Saul Bellow and Joseph Conrad together almost. Gersony exposed the illusion of knowledge where knowledge really did not exist. He opposed every aspect of groupthink. You know, whatever the basic assumption was in Washington, he exposed it as false. And he did this by interviewing what he told me were the most important people in the world, refugees. Because he said refugees were the true experts because they know what happened to them. It wasn't interpreted. They weren't college educated, so they didn't kind of figure out what you wanted to hear from them. They just told you the unvarnished truth. It was told to me time after time that Gersony always found the truth. Here was this high school dropout contractor for the State Department who, when he got back to Washington, was sought after by secretaries of state, deputies of the CIA, et cetera. Everyone wanted a briefing from Bob Gersony because he was not just such a good observer, but such a good briefer. He was he basically invented anxious foresight, thinking constructively, pessimistically in order to avoid tragedy, thinking tragically in order to avoid tragedy. Most of his work was done under Secretary of State George Shultz, who was a humanitarian realist. He was a realist at a time when realism was a real elastic form of internationalism. It hadn't been kind of corrupted by the neo-isolationist realism of today. It was the State Department's golden age. He was one person who really made a difference and who really exemplified the American brand, or what the American brand should be. His story of his life is the story of history from the ground up in the developing world. What you're going to watch is my interview with Bob Gersony done when he was in Guatemala. Now, he's 75 years old, but still living in the mountains of northern Guatemala, interviewing hundreds of people, of rural people, asking them why they wanted to leave their country, why they want to migrate up towards the Mexican border to the United States. He's still doing what he did at 75 that he started in his late 20s. You know, this is his story. You know, he was a generalist at a time when generalists were really respected. He worked on all continents, but if he had a specialty, it was Central America, where he spent most of his life. Globalists have one-size-fits-all solutions to problems. Generalists work from the ground up, and Gersony was a great generalist who really exemplified humanitarianism and ran away from publicity. He didn't network with journalists, with media types, or anything. And I never met anyone who saved as many lives as he did. Thank you.
Robert Gersony is the greatest humanitarian you never heard of. He was a consultant for the State Department and USAID. In so doing, he traveled around the world to some of the most dangerous places on earth to help the populations and to gather ground truth so that he could come back to Washington and advise policymakers on what was really going on the ground.
In his mid-70s, Bob continues to go out in the field and do humanitarian work. Bob, here is the Benjamin Franklin Award for Public Service this year. Congratulations.
I'm really incredibly grateful to the board and to the members of the Foreign Policy Research Institute with its storied history. Even to be considered for this award is a great honor. Thank you very much.
First of all, tell us about the individual people in Africa, Central America, Southeast Asia, and elsewhere with whom you have spent your entire professional life, and how you approach each individual interviewee.
These are people who've just escaped death and starvation. They were forced to leave their homes. They were separated sometimes from their families. They lost everything they had, or they lost their homes and their crops in an incredible catastrophe that just occurred. Sometimes they were people who were staggering across an international border, literally naked and starving, running away from violence. Usually, these were people with little or no education and who before had lived in extremely isolated places, largely incommunicado. I approached them, as you often say, Bob, as experts on what was happening on the ground.
I remember you once telling me that simply because someone is uneducated, that they didn't go to school, doesn't mean they have bad memories. And what you were really trying to access was their memories about what had happened to them.
The kinds of people I met with who had little or no education, I would say the great majority might have been illiterate. They really had a great expertise on the dynamics on the ground, all of them, the human rights situation, military situation, and so on. And in fact, Bob, as I told you once, I think the people with less education were actually the most honest, the most straightforward, and the most literal witnesses to what had happened. I avoided asking them sensitive questions. I tried to use a method that was chronological so that people would tell their stories without my specific questions framing their perspectives. When there were silences in the meeting, when people suddenly stopped talking, I resisted the urge to jump in with another question, but would just let them think. And it was really incredible what things you learn by not asking.
How does your kind of work fit into the development of foreign policy and our foreign aid strategy?
There's no substitute for this kind of field work. Talking with hundreds of people who are themselves eyewitnesses, who are in direct firsthand contact with the evidence, they bring a whole new dimension to our understandings. Now, I'm not saying this is the only way to understand the situation. What I'm saying, it's one essential piece of the puzzle of our analysis. that we shouldn't be overlooking the opportunity to tap the expertise of people who have a lot of useful information to inform us about. I think it makes our foreign policy more effective. It serves our national political and security interests, and it sharpens our humanitarian policies. And there doesn't have to be a conflict among these factors. In fact, my experience, and I think you agree, is that they complement each other. They end up making the lives of the people we're talking to and hundreds of thousands, maybe even more, of others better, more peaceful. We deal with the root causes of the problems, and it makes our foreign policy materially sharper.
Tell us in general terms about the Foreign Service officers with whom you have worked for decades. You interacted with ambassadors who were legends in their time, and you've seen several generations of Foreign Service officers, and you always worked with them.
My work is a product of the efforts of 10,000 people. It's the 8,200 people principally who spent an hour or two with me generously out in the field. All in all, about 2,000 Foreign Service officers around the world. They've been the ones who, when I come back with conclusions and I move on to my next assignment, are the ones who follow through and solve some of the problems and implement some of the recommendations I've made.
What has America meant for you and your family?
My parents were refugees who fled at 2 o'clock in the morning when the Nazis attacked Antwerp. They originally got temporary asylum in Mozambique and ended up coming to this country with $60 in their pocket and speaking very little English. They loved America so much. And I am first generation born in this country. It's part of the reason I decided to serve in the Army in Vietnam when I was called. And when I was in the Army, I met hundreds of people from across the country, people of all races, all classes, all backgrounds, all educational levels. And I feel like it really helped me get to know my country a great deal better. So for the last 40 years, what I've tried to do is to faithfully represent what I believe are our American values and the values that our taxpayers who paid for my work would expect me to use in my work. And by that I mean compassion, but also pragmatism. Receiving this award, I just want to say again that how grateful I am to the members of FPRI, to the board.
You really exemplify, the hardcore aspect of American soft power and doing good in the world. Thank you so much. And again, congratulations.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you so much to Robert Gersony and Robert D. Kaplan for those inspiring remarks, and to Robert Gersony for his years of extraordinary service and for being a superb example of what it means to be a good American abroad. With this, our program comes to a close. It was inspiring to hear about good Americans doing good works across the globe, and I hope that our program tonight provided a glimpse into a new dimension of U.S. international affairs and the importance of this work done by good Americans. Thank you for joining us this evening, and I look forward to seeing you at future FPRI events. And now, please join me in the reception area for dessert and conversation. Thank you.